Hello my fellow nerds and welcome back. I'd just like to start by saying a huge thank you to all the people who have been watching and listening to my content and joining me on this side quest of mine to learn more of the 40k universe, practice my voice work, and speculate wildly during the whole thing. I'd also like to thank Cody1570 for his comment on my first video, which inspired me to delve further into this rabbit hole. Hopefully you like my thoughts on this, Cody. Now, before we begin properly, I just want to say that I'm not a fan of time travel plots in any form of media, and rarely feel those type of stories ever go down well. Which is unfortunate to say, as this video is entirely... Now, let us begin. Where you stand now, the Emperor said, is the present. Do you see the top of the cliff? Of course, sire. That is the future. You see it. You know what it is. Now reach it. Ra hesitated. Now? Climb, custodian. You question the nature of my foresight. I am granting you an answer. Ra moved to the rock face, looking over the stone, finding his first grips. He tested them, finding them strong even against the weight of his armor. The weaker ones he avoided. Less than 10 heartbeats had passed when a rock cracked and crumbled in his gauntleted hand. Ra skidded, arresting his fall by clutching at the stone. Another gave way, sending him the last few meters to the rocky ground in a breathy cloud of white dust. You looked for places to safely grip, said the Emperor, yet you have already stumbled. You did not know the stone was weak. It looks strong. The Emperor smiled, and it was by far the most unpleasant sight Ra had ever witnessed. Emotion painted across a human face, as false as the grotesques at any masquerade. Yes, the Emperor agreed. It did, and you only learned the truth too late. Now climb. Ra hesitated once more, a hesitation that bordered upon defiance. As if such an action were even possible for one such as he in the presence of his master. It is not necessary, sire. I believe I understand now. Do you? Look out across the water, Ra. Ra returned to the Emperor's side and did as he was bid. The water rippled in sedate waves, sloshing around the rocks that lined the shore. At the horizon's very edge, he could see the mirroring lip of another landmass. I see another land, an island, perhaps. It is Albia, many thousands of years ago. But that is unimportant. You see the shore. You know it is there. You know you could reach it by ship, or by swimming, or by flight. That is what you know. The Emperor's dark eyes lost their focus. He faced towards the distant shore, but Ra doubted he was still seeing it. So, you journey towards it, but all you can see is your destination. You cannot see the beasts below the water that devour travelers. You cannot know if the wind will blow you and throw you aside from your course. And if the wind does blow, will it send you east, west, north, south? Will it shatter your craft completely? Perhaps there are rocks beneath the water, impossible to see until they grind and tear at the hull of your ship. Perhaps the inhabitants of that far shore will fire upon your craft before you make landfall. The Emperor turned back to Ra, though curiously, his eyes didn't clear. But you can see the shore, Ra. Did you fail to predict any of those possible flaws between here and there? Perhaps I predicted them all, sire. Perhaps I factored in the possibilities of each one occurring. Maybe so. And what of the eventualities you could not predict? Each passing moment is rich with 100,000 possible paths. The craftswoman making your boat may suffer a heart failure before she can gift it to you. Or she decides not to offer you the boat at all. You say the wrong words to her. You offer the wrong currency. She lies to you, for she is a thief. An enemy sabotages your boat before you set sail. You reach halfway across this channel of water, only to see a more appealing coast to the east or west. Minute after minute, possibility upon possibility, path after path, all variables you are unable to see from where you stand at this moment. The Emperor reached out as if he could crush the coast in his golden gauntlet. His expression was cold in its pale ferocity. I can see the coast, Ra. I know what awaits me there. But I cannot see the infinite vicissitudes between here and there. At last, he lowered his hand. That is foresight, Ra. To know 1,000,000,000,000 possible futures, and to be left to guess at the infinite ways of arriving at each one. To map out even one possible eventuality, taking into account every decision that every living being will make that will impact upon the others around it, would take all of the lifetimes I have already lived. The only way to know for certain, he trailed off, gesturing to the distant shore, is to reach the other side, said Ra. In Master of Mankind, the Emperor explains to the custodian Ra that his prophetic abilities are more or less foresight, the ability to predict certain outcomes by using the knowledge gleaned from past and present events, and that though he can see the eventual outcome, he does not know exactly how to reach that destination. In essence, the Emperor visualizes his desired outcome, then considers every possible variable in order to achieve that outcome. However, the downside to this is that fully testing out one of these variables can only be done in real time until reaching completion, meaning that though he does predict as much as he can, he is still taking a risk, as he cannot truly know everything, which, for the Emperor's goal of saving humanity, is not necessarily a good enough method. Unless, what if the Emperor is doing this? What if he is testing every possible outcome in order to reach this goal of bringing humanity to the peak? What if the Emperor has been repeating the events of the last 40,000 years, give or take a few thousand depending on the start point? What I am proposing is that the Emperor essentially has a save point, one that he will go back to after a certain amount of time and start again, changing just a few small things at a time, seeing what the eventual outcome will be, and should he decide he needs to try again, he does. Though with it being 40k, I doubt it would be as simple as that. For no matter how well you know the future, you are still bound by the restrictions of the reality you are in. If all you have to work with is limited by the time period you are in, and the tools of which that time period can provide, then that is your restriction. This could also apply to the so-called save point I mentioned. What if the Emperor can go back to a certain point of time, a point of time where the foundations for the Horus Heresy, or any Primarch version of a heresy, is already in motion, and so cannot be stopped? Which then brings me to the speculation of what the Emperor gained from the war portal on Moloch. It is widely speculated that the Emperor gained the power and knowledge to create his Primarchs from the Chaos Gods, striking a deal with them that he would later go on to break, leading to the primordial powers to manipulate events in order to take what they are owed. A good example we have of this is from the Horus Heresy book, The First Heretic. You have been raised with the tales of the Primarchs that lead your legions, but you have been fed centuries of lies. In a matter of moments you will witness the truth. The Anathema dealt with the powers of the warp long before he left Earth on the Great Crusade. The Anathema desired mighty sons, and the gods granted him the law to forge them with a union of divine genetics and psychic sorcery. He came to my masters, hungry for answers, beseeching the gods for power. With the law they gave him, he shaped his 20 sons, but treacheries have occurred. Oaths sworn in blood and paid in soul have been broken. The Anathema now refuses to show humanity the primordial truth, and the gods of the warp grow wrathful. The anathema is keeping his 20 Primarch sons and paying no price to the powers that gifted him the knowledge. Now, unfortunately we can't take anything that a demon says as pure truth, because it's a demon. However, there is more likely than not some truth to this, and so this is what I'll be going off. Many think that what part of the deal was that the Chaos Gods would get half of the Primarchs, while the Emperor would keep the other half, which would mean that the Emperor knew from the beginning that half his sons would betray him, which ones, however, remained a mystery. In the audio drama Malcador, First Lord of the Imperium, Malcador is telling his dying friend that the Horus Heresy was planned. We wanted the Primarchs to turn against one another, against their father. Be assured, we maneuvered each of them from the moment of their rediscovery, pitting them against one another, stroking their brotherly rivalries with his unequal favor. This is the only real evidence we get that can back up the idea that half the Primarchs would fall to chaos, and is unfortunately very unreliable, as Malcador, after the death of his friend, then says he was lying. What part he is lying about isn't known, but for now, and the sake of this theory, let's assume knowledge that half the Primarchs would turn was true. Now, let's say entering the warp gate on Moloch is the Emperor's save point, as we know that the warp doesn't follow the standard rules of time that reality does. So, no matter what happens, so long as he is able to get back to this save point, and that save point is when he entered the warp gate and got his powers, he will then restart his mission from the point of Moloch. His deal is made. He must make the Primarchs, as that plan is already in motion. Knowing that half his sons will betray him, he starts to play around with the variants, testing out which one will bring him to his goal, possibly changing who he makes War Master to see which version is preferable. He openly says to Ra that the best way to get to the goal is by trying every scenario, yet still explains that the logical path of which should be taken is to just try. Maybe just hinting that what he is actually doing is trying every single path, thousands of lifetimes, to reach that goal, while also actively assessing the movements of the timeline he is currently in. Just because he knows the majority of what will happen doesn't mean that the small changes he made can't have a massive overreaching effect on those things. The Emperor is still using reason and logic to make his movements, just with the advantage of having seen these events already played out. And it could be possible that his only means of travelling back in time to the point on Moloch isn't just a place he can go to, but also a time. What if he has to wait until a certain point in the galactic timeline in order to travel back to the save point, say for example sometime in the 40th millennium, or 42nd millennium? Maybe the means in which to travel back in time is thousands of years ahead, and so he must bear the pain and suffering of his mistakes until that moment. Using that time to learn more, to plan ahead by seeing other possible outcomes from the reality he has made from the choices of this timeline. And of course, being bound to the Golden Throne has its restrictions, and so he needs help. Help perhaps from someone like Belisarius Cawl. Belisarius Cawl has been clear in his loyalty to the Emperor, and acknowledges him as the Omnissiah, and though he is loyal, he is considered by many as borderline heretical. The things Cawl does go so far out of the realm of what the current day Imperium stands for, even some traitor chapters could be seen as more loyal than he. Cawl, despite the beliefs of the Adeptus Mechanicus, is heavily invested in the advancement of technology, the use of AI, and the use of alien technology, enough so to the point to directly disobey Roboute Guilliman's orders against the creation of AI, of which Cawl then made an AI of Guilliman. The Emperor and Cawl are on a joint effort to take over the galaxy for the Imperium, yet each time the traitor legions lead to the Emperor being bound to the Golden Throne, with, as we now know, the Emperor's soul split. This then leads Cawl to build the Emperor a new body in Alpha Primus. They will go back in time 40,000 years and start off their plans again, this time changing one or a couple of small things and seeing if this version works. This is how they get so far, because they know all the events, and then proceed to spend the additional 10 to 12,000 years either learning more so the next time they can get further and try new versions, or because that is the point of which they are able to successfully go back in time, and so have to let events play out until that point, especially if they want to repeat events from exactly the same point in order to better predict the outcome. It could even be both of these things. It is basically like they have their most preferred save point in a game, of which they know that 40,000 years ago is the perfect point of which to start and get that 100% complete file. This can also work with the idea that Alpha Primus has all 20 gene seeds, and though technically old at a supposed 10,000 years, he is young compared to the Emperor, well, his previous version, and so his body is unable to use the full extent of his power, or have proper access to all of it, until he goes back in time with Cawl and revisits the warp gate of Moloch to consolidate his power again. In Dark Imperium, the Cawl Inferior tells Roboute Guilliman that Belisarius Cawl wishes to use all 20 gene seeds to restore the traitor and lost legions, explaining that he has experimented with them and sees no negative signs of degradation or unwelcome tendencies. "What of those gene lines with more deeply ingrained flaws?" asked Guilliman. "The Blood Angels and the Space Wolves." Cawl's research and his own reading had uncovered dangerous faults that the sons of both gene lines in question had done their best to hide. "My standard response remains unchanged. Archmagus Belisarius Cawl understands your reservations. The corrected flaws in the new gene stock show no signs of regression to previous unstable states, whether in successor chapters composed entirely of new Primaris Space Marine type, or in already established chapters. Elimination entirely of the more idiosyncratic traits of some gene lines is, however, not to be recommended. They form part of the Emperor's original vision, and are, in any case, crucial to their proper function. I will restate Archmagus Belisarius Cawl's position in this matter. The improved gene seed of the 9th and 6th Legion stock is operating within acceptable parameters. Furthermore, he has continued experimental implementation and monitoring of the thus far unused gene seeds in experimental test subjects. That of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 8th, 11th, 12th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, and 20th Legions all show no signs of degradation or incidents of unwelcome tendencies within the recipients. All is well, my lord. Archmagus Belisarius Cawl reassures you. He is so satisfied that I am instructed to repeat his request that those gene lines be put into full production and be allowed to serve the Imperium as the Emperor intended. "No," said Guilliman firmly. "I cannot allow it." "My lord, the characteristics of your brothers are too valuable to discard. The Emperor's original schematics of warriors bred to specific purposes is sound and should be exploited. In the current circumstances, we are operating with half our weapons unavailable to us. The Omniscience plan is unbalanced. Putting the remaining 11 augmented Primaris gene seed lines into production would allow far greater tactical and strategic flexibility of Space Marine forces, particularly when working in concert. "I say again, no. Do not progress any further with this research." "The warriors are not at fault. The science is not at fault. Their Primarchs were. Chapters from your gene line have also fallen in the past millennia, Lord Regent, and we do not censor them." "I said no," said Guilliman forcibly. There was a silence, full of hums and clicks. "As you command, my lord," said the machine eventually. "Archmagus Belisarius Cawl will comply." Can I truly believe that? Thought Guilliman. Even Guilliman, with all his authority, still believes that Cawl would continue his research with the forbidden gene seeds. And the Inferior Cawl point-blank states that Belisarius Cawl has indeed done experimental implementation of these gene seeds. So, perhaps if Belisarius Cawl couldn't openly rebirth those legions, but instead pulled all of them together into one being, Alpha Primus, then that was his loophole. Maybe Belisarius Cawl isn't even aware he is building a new vessel for the Emperor. The memory of this may be lost to 10,000 years since the Emperor's fall. We know Cawl has done memory and data dumps, essentially resetting certain aspects of himself. Maybe he just isn't able to retain this one last command from his Omnissiah, yet still works towards it out of some zealous, deeply ingrained desire to do so, or for the sake of his own ego and rightfully placed self-confidence. It was this ego that allowed Cawl to gain control when Sedayne tried to take over his body with the Dicom's technique. Something until before had never happened, as the host body would always submit control. Which also leads me to think that if Belisarius Cawl goes back in time with the Emperor, then could he actually be Sedayne? What if the reasons Cawl's personality kept control was because Sedayne was just an older version of Belisarius, who had travelled back in time with the Emperor? Though, because he's really just a human, he cannot remember these events. He just isn't able to retain memories after a certain period of time. Or he trusts himself with his loyalties to the Emperor so much that even should he dump those memories, he'll innately continue with their plan. So when we get this conversation that the Emperor has with Sedayne/Cawl, it isn't the Emperor seeing the future, but just knowing outright that Sedayne and Cawl are one in the same. "Belisarius Cawl," said the Emperor. Confused by the name, Sedayne looked upon his hands. They were old and veined already. Decades of war lay between this moment and the moment that Cawl and Sedayne inside the engines of Dicom's. Another room in time, another door that could be opened at will by the speaker. "My name is Ezekiel Sedayne," said Sedayne. "For now," said the Emperor. The Emperor was by his side at the bridge's parapet. Cawl, or was it Sedayne, trembled as he looked upon him, but he appeared unremarkable, as he often did. His long hair was tied back. He wore a scientist's white, crisp garb. He was not tall, nor was he short. He was handsome, but not outrageously so. Slight, but not thin. An unremarkable being were it not for the terrifying sense of power that radiated from him, as untamed as the heart of a star. Sedayne felt fuzzy. The working of time demands that memories of the future be hard to hold, and they slipped away. Why had he come out there? To rest, he said aloud. But he did not remember what he was doing before he came to the bridge. "You are the Emperor," said Cawl, or Sedayne, or both of them. "I am," said the Emperor. "Am I meeting you?" "You have met me many times, Belisarius," said the Emperor. "But not as..." He frowned a frown on Sedayne's face. It was a younger face, but still old. "But not as me." "In a manner of speaking." The Emperor looked at him sidelong. "In another manner, you are Ezekiel Sedayne, and always have been. And Cawl is a fragment, an artifact left behind by a desperate man's attempt to stay alive." "That hasn't happened yet," said Cawl. "When is this?" "Every moment, no moment, a moment gone. Nothing ever passes, not truly, but goes only beyond notice." "Ah," said Cawl, or Sedayne. "You are free of this, is that so?" "No one is free of time," said the Emperor. "Not even me. As long-lived as I am, it is ironic that the one thing I lack is time." The Emperor frowned. "There is never enough." "Is this a dream within a dream? A dream remembered? Or did this really happen?" asked Cawl. The Emperor laughed. It was a sound as terrible as an avalanche thundering down mountainsides. "Is there any difference between those things?" "Are you always this frustratingly gnomic?" said Cawl. "Because, to be frank, it is a little disappointing." The Emperor laughed again, with genuine mirth. "I do like you, Belisarius, though many do not. But it is not your duty to be popular. It is to be important. Every dream is a reality somewhere. Know this, Belisarius Cawl. I will need you. You will think you have betrayed me. You will not in the end." "What are you talking about? You are the Omnissiah. I can never betray you." "You will. said the Emperor sadly. "But you will be right to. You will not again." Does Sedayne remember this conversation? "Foresight is not a steady friend, Belisarius. One day it may strike with startling clarity. For centuries, it is only a feeling. This is a good day." If the Emperor is aware that Sedayne will one day become Belisarius and vice versa, due to the many times he has repeated these events, then it isn't necessarily him speaking directly to Cawl, but leaving a message of assurance for him to remember at a later time. And now, finally to go over the Emperor and Alpha Primus's parallels. Alpha Primus is stated to have coppery skin, possibly making him look more like Lorgar over any of his other gene fathers. And Lorgar has often been said to look the most like the Emperor, more so than any other Primarch. Alpha Primus could indeed look like the Emperor, exactly like the Emperor in fact. And we know, with the exception of a few, no one really knows what the Emperor actually looks like, and even those exceptions can't say for sure they know what they saw to be true. The Emperor can easily influence how others see him, so the scarred up face of an Astartes that looks like Lorgar wouldn't be hard to hide. To be clear, I'm not saying Alpha Primus looks like Lorgar, I'm just saying that under all those scars and with that coppery skin, perhaps he might. Yes, I fully understand that I am really overreaching for that one. Next up, I'd like to go over these two quotes, one from Alpha Primus during a discussion with some Primaris Marines in the Great Works, and another quote from the Lion, Son of the Forest, when Lionel Johnson gets hold of the shield of the Emperor. "I hurt," Primus interrupted. "Everywhere. My dreams are black. My soul is shackled by another man's ideal. I see more and know more than any human being ever should. In creating me, Cawl tried to match the Emperor's achievements. It did not work. I pay for his arrogance every second of every day. I tell you because you should know that the Archmagus Dominus talents are not infinite. I am your prototype, and living evidence of his overreach." The Lion reaches for it, and as his fingers touch it, fire, fury. He stands on a battlefield with his shield on his arm, under a dark sky, but he can see all the stars and he knows their names, and he can feel everything around him. All the humans hurting and bleeding and dying. All those Xenos abominations and all the tiny creatures burrowing through the soil and the trees and the grass and the wind. He can feel it all, and it is all connected, a web of power, and this is not overwhelming. This is just how he lives. Instant to instant to instant. The Lion staggers. The shield is on his arm. He knows the touch of that mind. He has felt it before. Father. Pain, suffering, knowing all of this lived instant to instant. Experienced, yes. Aware, yes. But not overwhelming. Alpha Primus could be connected by more than just having all 20 of the Primarch's gene seeds, if that really is what he is made of, grown from them, birthed from them. Then what if the part of the soul that split from the Emperor before he fought Horus, this possible reintroduction of the Star Child or a similar concept, has housed itself in Alpha Primus? The same soul, but now split, yet still connected. And so it still feels more, sees more, knows more. What if, when Primus says his soul is shackled by another man's ideal, he isn't talking about Belisarius Cawl like we expect him to be, but instead talking of the Emperor, yet even he himself doesn't realize it. Alongside the 10,000 years of pain he experiences, even though Cawl doesn't know why, the pain Alpha Primus feels could be connected to his other half on the Golden Throne. Yet, they are still too far separated that these feelings, this knowledge, this pain, just can't be comprehended. So, to clarify on how I see the timeline working out, In the original visit to Moloch, the Emperor steals, bargains, or whatever he does to get his power. In all other visits after that, whenever they go back in time, he is just repeating the process and fixing himself back to full glory. This then makes it interesting that Alpha Primus says he doesn't trust Cawl. At one point, the Emperor tells Cawl that he will betray him, or at least thinks he will be betraying him. What if the creation of Alpha Primus is this believed act of betrayal? It doesn't quite feel like enough, but it could go further. And this is me trying to add some drama, so humour me. What if Alpha Primus is told he is the new vessel for the Emperor? He feels betrayed by his own father and resists, possibly fearing the loss of his identity and memories. And as Cawl genuinely states he loves Alpha Primus as a son, maybe in the same way he loves the Emperor, he feels the pain of his own betrayal. And though once the process is complete and the Emperor has fully become one with Alpha Primus, he thanks Cawl, saying that he and Alpha Primus are one and the same, lifting the burden of betrayal from Cawl's metaphorical shoulders, and maybe adding a cheeky "I told you." They then proceed to go back in time through the warp, start from their save point, and test their next version and see if they can push any further. Or for all we know, this is the final timeline, the one where they reach the other side of the river, and finally win Warhammer 40,000. Thank you everyone for watching this video. If you did manage to get this far, then I hope you enjoyed it. And please let me know in the comment section below if there's anything you think I could have added, or may have missed entirely. Please, like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date on my new videos, and share to help the conversation reach more people.
Let's feed the algorithm gods.
My other socials are linked down below, as well as my Patreon should you wish to help support the channel for just £1 a month. Thank you very much for your time, my friends, and ta for now.